All right, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today for Weather Where You Are. We are talking all about upper level weather patterns today. Of course, when we are forecasting, we're telling you what's going to happen here at the surface, but what happens in the upper levels of the atmosphere can really dominate what is happening and what you feel and what you experience here on the ground here in North Georgia. So, our upper level pattern has been pretty feisty for us for the last couple of months, and it's been giving us some very unseasonably warm days. In fact, we had a handful of days in the month of October closer to 80 degrees. And yes, that had to do with some features at the surface, but it also had to do with some of our upper level weather as well. And our weather today and for the foreseeable future is really going to have a lot of upper level features that are ultimately impacting our forecast over the next 7 days. So we're going to first talk about an area of high pressure that is to our north. We're going to have a very strong mid-level high. So we look at multiple levels of the atmosphere, first of all, surface, mid, and upper level. And so the upper levels where you'll find the jet stream, which obviously helps move everything. The jet stream, a fast tunnel of air in the upper levels of the atmosphere that moves from west to east that helps push weather systems our way. But when you have areas of high pressure, that can kind of create a dome of protection for us, and that's been keeping us really dry and unseasonably warm. Now, we do have a wedge of high pressure that's going to build up to our north, and that's going to impact our forecast here at home over the weekend, as it is going to usher in some cooler air. So the way wind rotates around high pressure is clockwise, and there is a very unseasonably cool air to our north. We're going to pull in some Canadian cooler air, and let me go and get into here because my graphics decided they wanted to lag, and now we are well beyond where we should be. So let me back up really quick to get you where you need to go. But nonetheless, an area of high pressure, wind flows clockwise around that. And while I get my graphics together, we're going to do this for you. So wind flows clockwise around high pressure. That's going to pull in cooler air from Canada into our area by wedging it up against the Appalachian Mountains. And that will give us a cooler and cloudier forecast over the weekend. So if you are starting to think about your weekend plans, because let's be real, who isn't? It's Friday. Expect some cooler and cloudier conditions. And we'll talk about how that's going to change over the coming days and when we could potentially even see a nice cool off, something that I think a lot of us are probably waiting for. We'll talk about that as well in the next couple of minutes. I'm just going to get back to my graphics. They lagged a little bit, so that put us in a wonky spot. So once I get back to them, we'll get rocking and rolling here. But nonetheless, do know that we could potentially finally have some more fall-like weather on the way in the coming week or so, which will, I think, be much welcomed by a lot of us. So, all right, let's get back to business here. So we have, again, that area of high pressure that is to our north, and as we get that air to wrap around that high, cooler air to our north, it's going to run up against the Appalachian Mountains. We call it cold air damming. Essentially, the mountain range acts like a dam that holds back water, and it's going to help steer, just like dams steer water away from places that water shouldn't be. That mountain range is going to act as essentially a dam for that cool air to essentially go spill and streamline right into North Georgia. We have them a lot this time of year in the fall and winter. They give us those cooler, cloudy, kind of damp and misty mornings, especially, just like we've had the last couple of days. And this is going to hold on as we head into the weekend. We have a cold front to our south. That's going to kind of trap in some of the moisture. Now, that's at the surface level, and our upper levels, this high is really going to protect us from any kind of significant cool down. And I'll show you where that cool air is going to track in the upper levels along the jet stream in just a couple of minutes here. Here's a look at our high temperatures today nationally. So you can see up towards New York, they're highs in the 60s. Chicago, they're in the 50s. And so that's the cool air that we're being influenced by, with that high setting up in our mid to upper levels that's pulling in that cooler air. Look out towards Denver. They have a very strong weather system that's actually going to bring severe weather to parts of Texas today, snow to parts of the Rockies. That is going to make it close to us, but we're not going to really benefit from that cooler air. It doesn't look like that's going to necessarily cool us down, but we'll get another shot. It is fall and winter, so cold fronts kind of go on conveyor belts this time of year, and we'll talk about when we could experience some cooler air right now. So here's a look at our upper level pattern. What you're seeing on this map, the colors indicate a different temperature. So naturally, the more yellow, orange, red you go, the warmer it is, and the purples and blues, that is cooler air. So this area of high pressure in the upper levels, that's sitting off to our northwest. That will eventually push off the coast, but notice you see all those ripples of very cold air up in the Midwest and in the Northeast. That high is blocking any of that from coming through. Essentially, under an area of high pressure, air sinks. When air sinks, it warms, and again, it serves as kind of a block, a force field for any kind of significant weather to come, which is good in terms of severe weather. Protects us from severe weather. It kind of dissipates fronts sometimes. But what's bad is that that leaves us very dry, like we have been for the last month plus, and it also keeps us unseasonably warm, which for things like our fall color isn't great because I'm sure as you've noticed, we've had some really beautiful fall color this year, but a lot of it is now on the ground because our trees are all dying or the leaves are all dying because we don't have any moisture for them to thrive. So our fall color was beautiful, but it wasn't very long lived because we just have been too warm and dry, so it's made everything kind of be frail and fall off the trees. Now, going into next week, we will have a cold front. We'll have a cold front move in Monday, but again, that high pressure is going to kind of fizzle it out for us, so it's really not going to make our weather very significant. But going forward in time, it looks like another pretty significant cold front is going to start to move across the lower 48, impacting the northern plains and then the Midwest, and that could finally dip into our area late next week. Now, it doesn't look like we're going to see any 30s, but it'll at least put us back down to more seasonable temperatures, unlike what we're experiencing now and we have for really the past several days. We did have that exception earlier in the week when it was kind of cold and damp and cloudy. I shouldn't say cold, cool and damp and cloudy, but for the most part, looking at the overriding effect, we've been very warm, unseasonably warm. So when that high starts to retreat, that allows for dips in the jet stream to occur and ultimately enter our forecast here. But as long as that's parked over us, it kind of blocks all that from moving in. And that's how the upper levels have an impact on our forecast. Essentially, you have these upper level highs build in, they act like force fields, and it doesn't allow for any of that cooler air, the jet stream in the upper levels, to usher in any of that cooler air. Here's a look at what that looks like at the surface. So again, that cold air along a cold front, usually there's a parent low. That parent low is where you'll get the most spin. You get a lot of that mixing of precipitation. Sometimes you'll get some snow if the air is cool enough on the backside of it. We're just simply going to get that cold front, which along these cold fronts, when the air is warm out ahead of them, warm air versus cool air, that cool air is going to sink underneath it because it's more dense, lift up the warm air, and that usually creates thunderstorms, sometimes severe thunderstorms. So heading into next week, this is just one model. This is the more aggressive model. We could finally start to see a break in that upper level pattern and allow for that cooler air to usher in behind this front and ultimately let this front move through and bring us some substantial rain. Now, again, this is just one model. The other model that we look at long range is not hinting at this, but we're going to still hold our hopes up because it would be really nice to, one, get some rain. This would also bring us storms, unfortunately, but it'd also be nice to have some more fall-like weather because it feels like we were in summer and then we got a little taste of fall. Remember when it cooled off like very briefly and we were all in coats for a couple days, and then it warmed right back up and it stayed there. So, we'll hope we can kind of go back to more November standards in terms of the weather here by the end of next week. Let's take you into what is, oops, my bad, I'm totally on the wrong page here. When it comes to our first freeze. So because we've had this pattern solely dominated by an upper level ridging, which again, underneath ridging, you get sinking air. When air sinks, it warms, kind of like we call it compressional warming. Think about when you rub your hands together like this, you start to feel that warmth between your hands. Well, when high pressure is in control, it's pushing all the particles closer to the surface and they're bouncing off and hitting each other and creating that friction to create the heat. So that's been dominating our forecast. But now that that's moving out, that cold front can come in. But unfortunately, it's not going to bring us that cold blast of air that I'm sure some of you are wanting. Me personally, I'm cool with the heat. I like the heat. That's my jam. But if you were hoping for some cooler weather, because you're probably like, don't we normally get pretty cold around this time of year? You would be correct. That cold front isn't going to cool us down in such a way that it's going to bring any kind of freeze. Notice going all the way into Tuesday, those numbers are really hard to read, but that's 11/18. So that's the end of not next week, the week after that. So even beyond the 7-day forecast, really no shot at freezing. And that isn't normal for us. Our normal first freeze is usually on November 13th. So that's just a few days away. Now, our latest was December 18th, which is 1998. And honestly, guys, at the rate we're going, I wouldn't be surprised if we get a little close to that. Not saying that's going to happen, but we don't have any kind of freezing temperature in the foreseeable future right now. Even looking as long range as our longest range model can go, I'm not seeing 30s, at least for Atlanta, for that foreseeable future. And that takes us into the end of November. So we'll be flirting with that latest record. Now we are going into a pattern where we normally do have a warmer winter. We are not ushering into El Nino like last year, where we thought we would have an El Nino setup, which normally brings us those cooler and wetter winters. We're actually staying in La Nina, which is what we were during hurricane season. We kind of transitioned back into La Nina, giving us that more active hurricane season. But we're shifting back into La Nina, which ultimately keeps the jet stream higher and leaves our forecast a little warmer for the winter months. So that doesn't mean that we can't have some fun winter weather this winter. We'll be watching for it. But just looking at the bigger picture, that's not expected. So we're going to be watching this really carefully. We've broken a lot of records this year in terms of rainfall, in terms of temperatures. So we'll be keeping an eye on this. But even with that cold front moving through, that upper level pattern has just been holding so strong for us that we haven't had the chance at any kind of really cold fall-like weather yet. It does look like it's on the way, but not to the extent of freezing, which is also something that we normally do experience by this time of year. So that upper level pattern has really created quite a monster to our forecast because it's left us unseasonably warm over the last couple of weeks and really the last month, but some changes are on the way. So we'll look forward to that. We'll love to see that upper level pattern break down so we can usher in some more fall-like and more November appropriate weather. All right, everyone, thanks so much for spending some time with us here for Weather Where You Are. I hope you make it a wonderful day. Enjoy your weekend. First Alert Chief Meteorologist Jennifer Valdez will have the latest on that weekend forecast at noon, so be sure to tune on over to TV and watch Atlanta News First at noon. She'll have all the information for you. Make it a wonderful day.